of The Leader's Voice with John Torres. It's my YouTube channel, and you can catch some of my information there. But today, I'm with my friend who is Tom Sudbeck of Tom Talks. Today, we're going to talk with Tom about his program, which is entitled Faith-Centered Life Planning Blueprint. And you can catch it on his show on Tom Talks. So today, we're diving into a powerful topic. That topic is how faith-driven adults can find clarity, alignment, and purpose in the middle of life's responsibilities and transitions. So let's start right here. What are we here to talk about today? And why does it matter so much for people right now? You see, before we get into the solution, let's talk about the real problem. Tom, from your experience, what are the three biggest challenges faith-driven people face when trying to find clarity about their calling or next steps? And what does it cost them emotionally, spiritually, and relationally? So let's find out today. Why do they stay stuck, Tom?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, John, and those of you that are listening, thanks for joining us today. What I wanted to get after, and you brought up, there's what are the three main problems? So the first one is just having clarity. You know, what is that? Clarity on my purpose. That's what I need to have. The second thing is, once I've got that clarity on my purpose, how do I get alignment to all the other activities that I'm going to execute in life and all the tasks that I want to perform? And then lastly, what I want to get after is, how do you get peace? So you asked about, what's the cost? What do you end up not having? And a lot of times that's going to be peace. So I'm going to go to that end of it. So if you have identified your purpose, now this is your purpose in life, because
Right.
you may have a purpose for a task, for work you're doing, or for some specific activity within one of the roles that you have in life, but that purpose has to align with your end state purpose. So whatever that end state purpose is, you got to work your way through that. And in order to get to an understanding of what that purpose is, part of what I did is I took a planning process that I had written a book about and exercised in the Marine Corps. And I figured out, okay, if I'm going to put together a plan in the Marine Corps, I can use that same basic idea and that same basic process in order to figure out what my purpose was. Because the first thing you do is figure out the purpose of an operation. So that's one of the things that you got to have. So now I'm working my way back up. The second thing is that alignment piece, especially, and now the title of the blueprint is called Faith-Centered. And that's because you have to start out with that purpose, and you've got to have some faith and some justification for what your faith is on that purpose. And then you have to align the activities in your life to that overall purpose. And what you end up with, if you don't have that alignment, you're going to feel it internally. Your spirit is just going to be not at rest. It's just going to be angst. You're going to feel it in your heart. And so what you got to do is you got to make sure that you've got some peace with respect to the decisions you're making and why you're making those decisions. So now that gets us back to what the first point that I brought up, which was the clarity of your purpose. You've got to be clear in it. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up, the way you're going to get that clarity, is the fact that it's not the plan by itself. And if you go back to, I've got a military background, so I'm going to use a lot of examples from the military. And General Patton, most people know who he was. Patton always said, it's not the plan, it's the planning, because you start to learn about yourself. You start to learn about the basis for your decisions. And that provides you the context that you need in order to make those decisions.
That's excellent. So, okay, Tom. So that's the pain point, but there's clearly a better way. Give us a glimpse of the opportunity here and what becomes possible when someone finally gets aligned with their God-given purpose.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You got to wrestle with just the idea, John, your God-given purpose, because we've been given abilities, and then whatever stage in life you're at, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, or even your 70s. God's given you abilities and experiences, and he's given them to you for a purpose. He's got a plan. Divine providence is out there. Our founding fathers here in America, they respected divine providence, and they knew that there was certain things that were going to happen, and God was in charge of those things. So that's
Absolutely.
why, yeah, so that's why I said, the purpose that you got has to be faith-based on something. And I'm not saying you specifically have to practice the same faith I do, but you got to have faith in something. And if it's
Sure.
the right thing and it's God, and you focus
Yes.
in on God, now what you're going to be able to do is say, I understand it. And as you go through the planning, as I said, the planning is what's important, not the end product, but the planning.
Right.
You go
Right.
through, it's the mental gymnastics. It's how does my heart, how do my feelings fit into this? And then how do I execute decisions that I've made? So that's really what this process is and blueprint is all about, is going through. There's 7 steps in it. I took basically the 6 steps that were in the Marine Corps planning process, and I added some additional clarity on execution, the decision making, and then the assessment of those decisions and execution. So I
Can't
hope
beat
that kind
number
of helps a little
7.
bit.
Yeah, that's great. You can't beat number 7. That's the number of completion, and so we like that number. Hey, listen, I love that, Tom, and we're going to unpack that system in just a minute. And I want to just say to the audience that's watching today, if you're listening and feel inspired to go deeper, you can book a free consultation with Tom by using the link below right in this video. And we're going to take a quick pause right here. We're going to come right back and we're going to get into the rest of this. So, Tom, we're just going to take a quick pause. Mind for a moment, Tom. How did you personally discover this blueprint? Was there a moment, a struggle, a turning point that made you realize this was the work that you were called to?
Wow. So I already told you a little bit, John, about my background with the Marine Corps planning process and writing a book on that. And what I did is when I retired from the Marine Corps, I said, this planning process, I can apply this to any situation and any type of organization, and it's going to work for them. And I did. I used it often. Then, about 9 years ago, the pastor at my church started this program where he called it Wednesdays with Father. And we would meet for exactly 60 minutes. I mean, when that clock ticked over to 7 o'clock, he started. And when it clicked over to 8 o'clock, he stopped. And it was awesome. Well, I started thinking, I said, he's telling me, about his life story, so to speak, and how he came to
So now let me
realization.
make sure I'm clear, Tom. Was this just you, or was it you and the parish, the people of the parish as well?
Hey, good question. It was the parish. There was
Okay.
probably, I think we started out with somewhere between 50 and 70 people that were
Awesome.
involved in this group. And
Very
I started taking down notes in a binder. And after a period of time, I said, you know what? I said, I should be able to use my planning process that I said applies to everything, because I'm taking notes about my life now and things I should be thinking about based on what my pastor's telling me. So I did that. I actually took and I wrote out an outline for my life plan. I looked at my purpose, and we talked about that a little while ago. Your purpose is key. And I
Yes.
came up with what I thought was my purpose. I thought at that time, and it was my purpose. I had it solidified. I was using it for the decisions I was making, but I wasn't making the best decisions, John. And
Okay.
so then about a year and a half ago, I recognized in my faith journey that I may not have picked the right end state purpose for my
Hmm.
life. So
Okay.
I went right back to the very beginning of my planning process. I said, what is my purpose? And I changed it. I
Wow.
realized I needed the right purpose in order to make the decisions in my life that were aligned, so that now I'm achieving what I know from my perspective, what I think God's purpose is for my life. And
That's
so
wonderful.
that's how I got to where I'm at. It helped me to establish the goals And if we don't get to it at some point in time, I want to kind of give you a couple examples of how that kind of worked in my life.
That's excellent. I'm a firm believer in that, obviously coming from a faith background, that scripture from Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, where the apostle Paul says, we are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which were prepared in advance for us to do. The inference is from the foundation of the earth. God knew we would be here, had a plan and purpose for our life, even as Psalms 139 says, verse 16, all our days are ordained for us and written in a book. So God does have a plan. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And that leads me into the next question. For someone watching right now who feels absolutely overwhelmed or unclear, what's one small action step they can take today to start moving towards clarity and alignment?
Well, there's thanks, John.
Sure.
Down below. You'll find a link where you can click that link and you can set up a meeting with me, and it's a complimentary meeting, and I can walk you through just a couple of steps that you need to be thinking about, and then if we decide from that initial complimentary call we want to take it further, we can continue to move on further. Because just like I said, it's not like you're going to sit down and write a plan and it's never going to change. You're going to go through this planning process. And as you go through the planning process, you're going to put into context a lot of the decisions that you need to be making. And I could start to, on that initial call, start to get you to thinking about some of those things and how to do that. So that's something that I think you need to do right now. Just like I said, I sat down and the first thing I did is I figured out what my purpose was. 7.5 years later, I figured it was wrong.
You had to
So,
make some tweaks, didn't you? There were
yep,
some tweaks you had
yep.
to make.
But well, the good part, John, was the fact that I was able to actually use, even though right now looking back on it, I
Sure.
recognized it wasn't perfect, but I recognized it helped me. It helped me immensely.
There you
So,
go.
the talk, it's not like I've got a formal script that I'm going to run you through and certain
Right.
bullet points I'm going to hit you on. We're going to chat. And I'm going to bring
Gotcha.
the experiences I've got to the table and maybe help you kind of figure out a little bit about where you're going and the justification and the overall purpose for where you're
That's
going.
wonderful. So it's a discovery process together. You're going to help them discover that which God's
Yeah.
called them to and see some of the steps they can take. See, Tom, that's powerful. Do you have an example, maybe a story of someone that you've helped who've used this blueprint and experienced a real shift in their life, maybe their leadership or in a spiritual rhythm?
Yeah, I've got a bunch, but I'll give you one. I think this is one of the best examples. I was working with the gentleman, but he was also a friend of mine. I mean, I'd
Okay.
known him for a number of years. We're working
Sure.
through the process, and he calls me up one day and he says, "Hey, listen, I got this offer for a job, a promotion, and it's going to be a lot more money. It's going to take a little more time. It's going to take me away from my family
Mm,
and may not necessarily align with some of the goals I've got." He said, what do you think? Should I do that or not? And we ended up chatting about it for a while. And I did not tell him what to do. All I did was just said, did you think about this? Did you think about
sure.
that one? And
Sure.
so what he ended up doing is he ended up turning down the position that was offered to him because he
Wow.
says, my role as a husband to my wife and as a father to my children, I don't want to take away from my achieving the purpose in their lives because I need to be with them. I made a commitment to them and I need to be with them. So he looked at it from that perspective and not
Really
just
good.
a selfish personal perspective.
Sure. You looked at it the overall, what's the best for the family? How's it going to
Yeah.
affect my wife, my kids, us as a dynamic? That's really good, very thoughtful. That's
Yeah.
such an
The thing
inspiring. Go ahead.
the thing I want to get into, and I may bring it up again, but it's your roles in life. You start out with the end state purpose for your life, but then you have roles in life. Like for instance, John, you and I were both married. Okay.
Yeah,
So one of the roles we got coming out of that is as a husband. So you got a
absolutely.
role as a husband. The next
Yep.
thing, we're doing some work. We all do some kind of work. So
Yeah,
now,
or should be, right?
or it should be. That's right. So you've got a
Government shouldn't
role
be taking care of us.
as somebody who's performing at work.
Yeah,
You got to fulfill that role. If you're in a community where you're doing something with your actual physical community, like a neighborhood community, homeowners
sure.
association, or your city or town or whatever, you've got a role in that community. And then if you go to church, again, this is a faith-centered planning process. You go to church, there's a
Wonderful.
community that's there. So,
Yeah.
you got to recognize that not only are you doing this planning, not only are you going to build a plan, but you got to look at the whole cycle of decision making, execution, and assessment. And you got to look at it across all those roles and make sure that they're aligned. So,
Fantastic, Tom. That's really, really good. So, if the
yeah.
people that are watching here today, if they're listening and thinking, I need help with this, I want you to know that you can schedule a free consultation just using the link below. It'll take you to his page where you can then book a call with him or whatever, a consultation, and go from there. I know that you'll be blessed immensely. I believe wholeheartedly in what he's talking about finding that purpose for your life. Can't recommend it highly enough. So, having said that, then let's go a little deeper. What's the next big insight someone needs to understand if they want to create real, lasting change in their habits, priorities, or spiritual alignment? What can they do to make those changes or adjustments, Tom?
Well, the one of the things that I recognized for myself and then those that I was working with is right now in today's day and age, there's a lot of evil in the world. Okay. So I start and I'm doing a lot of studying, trying to figure out for my own personal faith journey and growth.
Sure.
I start reading and learning about the tactics that are actually being used against us every day.
Yeah.
We're being bombarded with them. Now, if you take on board what I'm talking about here, which is faith centered, you're going to be attacked even more.
Mm,
Why? Because evil does not want you to execute based upon your abilities, your experiences, and the faith that you have. So evil is going to come at you. Well, how do you counter that? Well, I started thinking more and more about it, and I said, that's exactly what the military planning process does. You take on a
right.
threat. Actually, the step is called war gaming, or it's
Mm,
hypothesis testing, whichever one you
okay.
want, and you actually look at how is the enemy going to act or
Wow.
react to me.
Sure.
So there's actually a step in the process where you actually work through what is the enemy going to do to me? What is evil? How is it going to attack me as
Sure.
I start executing my faith centered life plan?
Gotcha.
And I got to tell you, when you start thinking about that and you study the different methods that evil uses, you start to
Yes.
realize there's points at time where all of a sudden you feel anxious. You're laying in bed and you can't go to sleep because something is bothering you. And you think maybe the decision is not the best decision. And you go, wait a minute, is this real or is this the
Yeah.
devil
Yeah.
telling me that he doesn't want me to do it and he's putting obstacles in my place or getting me
Hey.
abstracted from what I'm
Yeah.
focused in on. So there's a whole step to that. And I got to tell you, when you go through that war gaming or the hypothesis testing, you're going to all of a sudden realize at certain times you go, why am I feeling like this? And you're going to go,
Right.
I know why. I'm being distracted right now.
Yeah. Very good, Tom. Reminds me of the scripture where Paul says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and then he lists four different levels of hierarchy, which obviously you from the Marines would understand hierarchy, authority, submission to authority, that whole situation, how the attacks come, all of those things. And even another passage, Paul says we are not unaware of the enemy's schemes, literally his tactics, his
Right.
devices that he wants to come. So this is very necessary stuff. I'd encourage you to be sure to book a call with Tom and check out what he's talking about today. What else can you tell us today as we're walking through this process here today? And what is another piece of advice that you want every faith driven leader, parent, or professional to walk away with today, Tom? What would you like them to know?
Well, what I'd like them to know is, and I've said it a couple times, there's the planning that you go through. you actually have to do a lot of mental gymnastics, is what we used to
Sure.
call it.
Sure.
And you got to be very introspective at that time to do your own personal life planning. You got to look at, what do I believe? Why do I believe that? And then how do I take that information and apply it to my life? And that's the real key. So a key takeaway is, it's the planning.
Yeah.
And I'll give you another example.
Yeah, please.
And
Yeah.
and
Tell me
this is,
another success story, would you?
yeah, they, well, I'm going to give you a lead in. And
Okay.
when we wrote the book, I was part of a team. So you
Okay.
don't you don't write a book in the Marine Corps without a lot of help. And a lot of advice coming in from the top saying,
Got you.
no, you're not going to write it this way. So
Wow.
as I'm working my way through it, the team I was working with, we thought that after 2 years of getting three different drafts out for comments throughout the entire Marine Corps globally, and
Amazing.
going out and teaching this,
Yeah.
we thought once we got the book published, we were going to be able to just say, now they just have to read the book. Well, that's
Sure.
not true. So for the last 20 plus years, I have been teaching the book that I wrote, thinking I would never have to teach it again. And that's
Amazing.
because people don't want to go through the pain and suffering. And it's not suffering really.
Right.
It's that self introspective
Yeah.
perspective that you're going to take. You got to look at yourself, and you
Sure.
got to look at the
Have to ask some
decisions you're
hard
making.
questions, don't you?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And when you start answering those hard questions, that's when all of a sudden you go, huh, the light bulb goes off. Yeah. You know,
Nice.
I should have picked a better purpose 7 years ago as opposed to a year ago.
Right. I'll be further down
Yeah.
the road, huh?
Yeah. Check.
Yeah.
So the other example I've got, which, that was personally about the Marine Corps planning
Okay,
process.
that's
There
wonderful.
was another young gentleman that I was working with, and he was getting ready he's going through preparation for marriage.
Okay.
And at the same time, he's changing his actual religion.
Oh my
So
goodness.
think about this. Here's a young man. Now, as old as I am as a grandfather, he's a young man, but
Yeah,
he's
you and I are the
he's
same age. We had this discussion.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. So he's a young man, but he's in that sweet spot group, from 35 to about
Okay.
52.
Okay.
He's right in that group. And
All right.
he's going through this whole marriage preparation thing and this religious preparation thing.
Mm,
And he's going, how do I need to think this one through, Tom? And
sure.
and it was a great discussion. And by the way, he is also another former Marine, so he was. We had a lot of things in common that we could talk about. But when you start talking about faith, it doesn't matter what your background is. It really doesn't. You've got life experiences that you bring to it, and that's what I would recommend to people. And that's the other success story, was this
Okay.
kid happy. They just had their second child about two
Wow.
months ago. And
Oh,
I'll tell you what,
wonderful.
it's awesome. It really is.
That's excellent that you can help them navigate that arena of life. Some of the biggest stressors. I did a whole series on stress, and I remember eustress and stress. Some of the biggest stressors are when you get married or when you're making major decisions like that, especially a child coming in. Those are huge stress factors in a person's life. And so, yeah, that's important that you helped him to navigate some of those waters. So before we wrap up today, Tom, what's one final piece of advice you want every faith driven leader, parent, or professional to walk away with today? What's something that you can give them as we start wrapping up our time together today?
Well, what I would do is, a lot of people have heard of Stephen Covey's book, The Seven
Sure.
Habits of Highly Effective People. Well, habit number one is start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
So, if you start with the end in mind, and it's pretty interesting, that particular book. He says start with the end in mind, but what do you do with that? I mean, seriously, what do you do with
Yeah.
that? He
Yeah.
talks about your funeral, you're standing there, what do people say? Well, what do you do with
Wow.
that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, if you start with that end in mind, you take my blueprint that I've created, you now
Sure.
have roles that you put those activities against. You have different
Yes.
phases. you have different seasons of your life. You now can put that into a context of both the role and the timing. So that's the key.
Amazing. That's great. You know, when I was leading these churches I was telling you about in our session together, I led about 20 churches in an organization, and we walked through a process called your timeline. And it took you clear back, and you drew a linear line, and then you put positive experiences and negative experiences, and you just
Hmm.
jot right next to those throughout your lifetime, to that point in time in your lifetime of things that you look back on from your birth to different significant events, salvation experience, water baptism, all of those life memories, graduation, all the different things, and then just see where God was maybe weaving and instrumental in that process to get to where you are here, and then saying, okay, God, what do you want with the rest of my life, and how do you want that to be mapped out? So I think you're hitting on something here. And let me just say today, for anybody ready to take the next step, Tom, walk us through exactly what happens when they book that free consultation. What will they walk away with from that particular call?
Well, they're going to start off with a couple of thoughts. And it's going to be an interaction, or it's going to be a
Sure.
discussion, and we're going to talk a little bit about where are you now. They can
Yeah.
expect to, hey, where are you, and what do you think your purpose is at this point in time? And so you when you book the call, think about that and even write it down. Because I'll tell you what, when you write it down, it becomes a little more concrete. Think about that
Yeah.
purpose and think about the roles that you have in life. And is there
Sure.
some sort of relationship between what you think that purpose is and those roles? That's part of where we're going to head when we have that discussion. And again, I got to tell you, when we start having that discussion, that's planning. That's what that is. And you
Yes.
you start to empty yourself a little bit, and you start to be introspective. So
Very,
um,
very good. This is very incredible, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your wisdom. And to everyone watching, be sure to check out the link and below. Make contact with Tom. Grab your free consultation, and you can follow the next steps after that. Can't recommend it highly enough. Everybody really does have a purpose in life. It's imperative that we find it. And as I said, that passage out of Psalms 139, every day is written in a book. And so God knows what it is. He wants that to come to full fruition, and it'll align with his plan and purpose for our life. Thanks again, Tom. God bless you. Look forward into future times with you. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this broadcast, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
okay, thanks, John. God bless.
God bless you.
If you enjoyed this video, click on the like button and subscribe for more content similar to this.